when Adolf Hitler told him face-to-face how he planned to invade his country, the president of Czechoslovakia fainted. His name was Emil Hachette, and for decades he had been a distinguished Czech judge. When he met with Hitler in March 1939, however, he was aged, timid, and suffering from a heart condition. He had become president of Czechoslovakia just months earlier when the Czech government had collapsed under threats from Hitler and abandonment by its allies, France, Britain, and the Soviet Union. Created by the Versailles Treaty that ended the First World War, Czechoslovakia was the first democracy to be established in Central Europe. After Hitler's takeover of Austria and its absorption into Nazi Germany in 1938, Czechoslovakia had become the Führer's next target. He demanded that the Czech government cede Germany an 11,000 square mile region of Czechoslovakia called the Sudetenland, which contained a large population of ethnic Germans. To justify a German invasion of the region, he unleashed a Nazi propaganda campaign to provoke unrest in the Sudetenland, then used the turmoil as an excuse to muster a German invasion force on the Czech border. Czechoslovakia boasted a powerful army, strongly fortified borders, and a mutual defense alliance with France and the Soviet Union, and Hitler privately feared Nazi forces could be defeated by combined Czech, French, and Soviet troops. As he had hoped, however, his threats of war prompted French Premier Édouard Daladier, a former college professor, to back away from his nation's treaty with Czechoslovakia, as did the Soviet Union. Daladier appealed to British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain for help, and Chamberlain, worried that Britain was no longer a match for Germany's rebuilt military, engineered a conference with Hitler in Munich, Germany. Meanwhile, prompted by Hitler's threats of war, the British government ordered workers to hastily dig air raid trenches in London, and in Paris, panicky refugees clogged roads leading out of the city. On September 29, 1938, Prime Minister Chamberlain, Prime Minister Daladier, Czech officials, and Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy, arrived at the Führerbau, an ornate government facility that the Nazis had recently constructed in Munich. A devoted ally of Hitler, Mussolini was purportedly present to help broker terms, but a compromise proposal he planned to present had been secretly dictated by Hitler, who had thus managed to rig the conference in advance. The Führer also insisted that the Czech representatives be excluded from the negotiations. Chamberlain and Daladier conceded, so the two Czech officials waited outside the conference room as the fate of their nation was decided by the others. As engineered by Hitler, Mussolini's compromise proposal stated that Nazi Germany would be allowed to seize the Czechoslovakian Sudetenland, but that Hitler would agree not to make any more territorial demands in Europe. Chamberlain and Daladier welcomed the proposal and pledged that Britain and France would abide by it. Hitler quickly signed the document, feigning satisfaction that war had been avoided. The deluded British Prime Minister did not know, of course, an observer would later report, that Hitler and Mussolini had already agreed at this very meeting in Munich that in time they would have to fight side by side against Great Britain. Daladier flew back to Paris where, to his surprise, he was met at the airport by cheering supporters rather than the angry crowd he had expected. At the airport in London, Chamberlain was also welcomed home by enthusiastic supporters. He stood triumphantly before newsreel cameras and waved his copy of the Munich Agreement, which he proudly proclaimed would ensure peace for our time. It was not to be. German troops promptly occupied the Sudetenland as planned, but within months, Hitler was demanding that Czech officials cede what remained of their nation to Germany or face immediate invasion. Amid rising tensions, the Czech government dissolved. Judge Hachette was made president, and Hitler officially invited him to Berlin to discuss measures to avoid warfare. On March 14th,